Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Marisol Nichols podcast. Now, my guest today is a warrior. She is a survivor. She survived physical and emotional and mental abuse as a mom of two boys for over 11 years. She was groomed at the age of 17 years old. She was able to escape her abusive home with her children, and she has fought back and is determined to help other women in her position. I find her incredibly inspiring. She is a survivor in every sense of the word. Please welcome to the podcast, Nillie Danesh. Welcome to the Marisol Nichols podcast. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So listen, my partner has told me so much about you and so much about your story. And I first want to really acknowledge you for being willing to talk about this and share your story with my audience. I think it's vitally important. We cover a lot of subjects on this podcast, and one of the things that I touch on a lot is grooming, whether it's grooming for trafficking or pedophilia or pornography. And in your case, it's grooming for something else. So I know that you've been a domestic violence survivor for over 11 years, and you were groomed since the age of 17. Would you mind just diving in and just telling me your story?
Sure. And I think the most important thing here is to understand when you're being groomed, you don't even realize it's happening. You don't even know what's going on. You're just being swept off your feet in a way, but then the little bits of it come in doses almost, to where it's not even recognizable. But looking back on it now, I can see it, 17 years later. So I was 17 and a half, and my ex would find ways to get in touch with me. He wanted to date me. So whether it was through a cousin at school or showing up at my gym or my neighborhood Starbucks, to the point where he was able to be face to face with me to ask me out on a date.
How old was he?
He was 25.
So he was 25 and you're 17. Okay.
Yes. But by the time we dated, or where we went on our first date, I was 18, just graduated from high school. Okay. But the process began early on. So whether he knew I was 17 or not, the time we first met, I was 18. And it just was instant. Took me on my first date. First thing I remember he told me, I'm going to marry you one day. Started with the love bombing. After 10 days, told me he loved me, key to his apartment, lavish, dates, and just made things very, almost very easy, but like it just was like a dream come true. Like, wow, this guy just came in and he's in love with me and he's perfect, right? But then 7-8 months in, things start to progress and change, and it was very emotional and mental abuse for me. The physical was in spurts, but it was the mental and emotional abuse, and it got worse and worse throughout the years. But it started with little jokes, then it turned into bigger insults, and it just happened too late. You're already in love and you think this is the one. So how do you manage that?
So were you living with him at this time when this started, or just deep in love?
Deep in love. But the interesting part was about 4 years into our relationship, he purchased a home down the street from my parents. He made things a way where it was very difficult for me to get out of the relationship, to the point where he was my neighbor now. So could you imagine? And I never even looked at it as this is weird, because our culture is very accepting, I think, of things like this. So for me, it just seemed oh, that's so sweet. He bought a house near my parents, Never did I ever think it was weird or it was a form of grooming or getting me into a trap relationship. But looking at it now, I find that very almost freaky, scary, right?
Right.
And then engaged. I graduated out of my university. I had never left for school. Which is also another cultural thing. I think my parents just didn't want me to leave. And then he was like, if you leave, then I'm going to break up with you, and made it very difficult for me to make a decision to go anywhere else. And then proposed a few months after I graduated. I ended up working for him. Didn't want me to work for anybody else. Didn't want me to get a job. I helped him run his business. So I became very, very involved in everything in a way that financially he was in control. And it was just, it just gets worse and worse as the years go by. So, but now looking into it, I'm like, oh my goodness, that is grooming, like love bombing, narcissistic, like so much of it. Right. And it's just sad that as a 17-year-old, I couldn't even recognize that.
No, I mean, of course not. You're not the only one by a mile. And I do actually have a lot of 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old girls that listen to my show. So your story is helping, just so you know.
Yeah,
you're helping a lot. And that love bombing, it's very interesting because they sort of start out with all of this, as you put it, love bombing and compliments and romance, I'm sure, right? And then it was interesting that you weren't allowed to go away to college. You weren't allowed to work for anyone else. I'm assuming he sort of cut off your circle of support with your friends. Were you allowed to have any friends?
So interesting enough, as we started dating in the beginning, he made me change my phone number. He said that he didn't like how all the guys that I would talk to before, anyone that he didn't like had access to my number. So I actually had to change my phone number, which is crazy because I did it. Like, I was like, okay, like I didn't want to like upset him or disrespect him. And he made me feel like these guys that were my friends were disrespecting him. And it really made me feel that way. Like he made me believe I was doing something wrong. So I changed my phone number. And yes, he right away started he put a huge wedge between me and my family. A distant cousin of mine, telling me, oh, she's trying to get at me. Like she's calling me and trying to go on a date with me, and really created a wedge between my family, in that sense. So it started very early, but it was almost like, I lost my virginity to him. He was my first boyfriend. So a lot of it was very, very important to me, and as my traditions and culture as well. So it was very fast, very quick, and then things just progress and you're already in it and you don't even realize what's going on.
How did speaking of family, I know that your background is Persian. Can you tell me about sort of that culture and what were they thinking of this 25-year-old man coming after their 17-year-old daughter or 18-year-old daughter?
To put it in perspective, my cousins who are married, they have 10 years difference, 15 years difference. My grandparents had over 20, 25 years age difference. So it's very culturally accepted. The age difference really isn't, it's almost preferred. Like he already has his job, his house, situated. Our families, everyone in our community kind of knew each other. It's very intertwined. And I feel like because of that, it also made it hard to leave. Like it was almost like a shame for me. Like everyone knew we were dating. So it made it difficult because I didn't want to be shamed. Like I didn't want my cousins thinking a certain thing or people thinking I dated this man. It didn't work out. And I felt that. I really felt a lot of pressure, even if it wasn't spoken and people didn't express themselves. It was the feeling I got from my family, my culture and traditions. Like dating was really not a thing. Like you don't date multiple people. You don't go date multiple men. You are kind of, supposed to be submissive and find that one person and kind of stick to it. Like they don't like, so it's a very hard thing because I also was raised in the United States. We moved here when I was 8 months old. So it's like an unspoken expectation, I think.
Yeah, I could see that. And just for my audience, what is your background?
So I'm Persian, Iranian from Iran, born in Tehran, and then moved here when I was 8 months old.
I could see that. So that culture and that tradition is very much weaved into your family. I truly understand that. I really, really do.
We don't introduce people, like we don't bring in, if you're dating someone, you bring them into the family, it's pretty much you're getting married. So like you don't bring, and every time my cousin would bring, like I remember my first cousin brought someone over and we met her and we're like, oh my gosh, they're getting married. Like that's just how it was looked at. So it was very important. And I think he very quickly wanted to intertwine himself in my family, to kind of make that more difficult.
It sounds like he knew this, and from what you're describing, I mean, now I understand him buying a house down the street from your family this is now, especially with your culture and your traditions, we can, as an outsider, see, oh, this guy's kind of planning this. This is calculated. So if it is okay with you,
Sure.
can you sort of talk about how this abuse escalated and what it turned into? And then I definitely want to get into the moment that you realized, like, okay, enough. But just so my audience understands how this goes. Some of these people haven't ever been exposed to this. I want them to actually understand this is where it can go.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it starts with certain, I remember I couldn't wear certain clothes to school. I couldn't wear like white pants. I remember one time he went ballistic because I wore white sweatpants to school. It's like the abuse of just like not allowing you to do certain things and you're not really realizing it. So taking me away from my friends and not having that support, not being able to go out with my friends, like really cutting me off, where I'm all his, almost a very possessive kind of controlling thing. And then if I wanted to, it's almost like you got in trouble and then you believe that you're doing something wrong. So it's, wanting my hair a certain way, always wanting me to look a certain way, would compare me to, it was all very like, it was like a subconscious thing. I think it comes in like doses and then you get the lavish vacation here and there. And then the sorry, I love you, the gifts, and then holidays, birthdays, they were always ruined. I don't remember having really good ones with him at all. Looking back, there's always something going on or something that he wanted to argue about. And then he like made up for it in a way. It's very hard to think back on it because you're like, did that really happen to me? And then the insults of like, your hair is not dark enough. You have like your dark circles under your eyes, like go fix them. Like just little insults here and there to make you feel like you need to look a certain way. And then emotionally, just like, I mean, it happened very slowly, like year after year, it got worse and worse and worse. And then you're just living on eggshells. I remember like Friday nights were kind of the day that he would lose it. I would always say the Friday night episodes. So I would always be very cautious of who came to my home, making sure the kids were taken care of, or I wasn't home, or just was very cautious of what was going on because it was always on a Friday night that something would happen. And it became a routine.
Was he drinking or?
So he would have a drink or two, but it's always like, why is he like all of a sudden switching so dramatically over one cocktail, like two cocktails? It was very hard for me to understand this, but anything would tick him off. I remember the house had to be immaculate. There couldn't be anything. Dishes had to be cleaned, food on the table, laundry done. Like it was so difficult to manage all this. So you're almost like on a hamster wheel, like, and you just get used to it. You're just surviving every day. You're like, this is it. And you don't realize it really. It's really sad to say this until you're off the wheel and you're almost detoxing and the no contact has to start because he would call me and be like, hey, I'm coming home. Like, make sure lunch is ready. It was not like, hi, honey, I'm coming home. I would like to have lunch with you. It was, I'm coming home. Make sure my lunch is ready. Or he'd call me, where are you? Are you at the gym still? It's been an hour. What are you doing there? Who are you talking to? Like, why aren't you home? And I remember the gym became my escape because I just wanted to get out of the house. But even that was like very controlled. He'd call me throughout the day, 10 times maybe.
What was the punishment if you didn't? Like, I get the idea that there was no option to say no at all. So what was the punishment if you didn't sort of obey him?
It was just very like verbally abusive. He would yell at me, scream at me, almost just like it's like the cycle where they almost cut you off in a way. Like they don't pay attention to you. They kind of disregard you. They ignore your calls, make you feel like you really did something wrong. Like I promise you, like if he would have told me the sky was purple, I would look at it and say, no, it's blue. And he's like, no, it's purple. And I'd look at it again and I'd actually question to see if the sky was purple. And that's the kind of abuse. That's what I mean. It was like very manipulative. And I think the hardest part was just isolating me from my support. So not having anyone to talk to. Everyone was jealous of him. Everyone was jealous of me, creating this like very weird dynamic between family and friends. Like his whole thing is everyone is a hater. That was his thing. Everyone is jealous of what you have. Look at this life I am giving you, this house. You don't have to work. You don't have to do this. But I was like a slave. So it wasn't pleasant. But he made me feel like this was the life he's giving me. Therefore, it needs to be appreciated.
Right. You should be grateful. Did he get physically abusive as well?
Yes, there was spurts of that though. And a lot of times was on vacation. I would get kicked out of the hotel room. Yeah, there was my most recent episode a few years, I think before I left, I was gambling with friends and I wanted to stay out with them. And he was like, you're acting like you have no money, sitting at a table, like some whore. Like, and he literally like kicked me out of my room and punched me in the arm. And got so aggressive that I was sitting on the floor and he literally kicked me out because he said he called me a whore because I was having fun gambling with my friends in Las Vegas. Right. Luckily my best friend was next door. I knocked on her door and I had to make up this whole story. Like, oh my gosh, I think he drank too much and locked me out of my room, and just really had to cover it up. And she like believed it. You know,
just so my audience that is also listening to this girl is gorgeous. You are beautiful. So the idea that this man is saying your dark circles are too dark, your hair is not dark enough, you're this, you're that. She is beautiful, just gorgeous.
Yeah, they don't make you feel that way. That's for sure.
I know.
They always make you feel like, I really would look in the mirror and be like, oh my gosh, he's right. Like I need to fix my face. And I believed him. And I was always.
It's a form of brainwashing.
Totally. And why aren't you, he would come home and be like, didn't your mom teach you to like put some lipstick on for your husband when he comes home from work? And I'm like telling you, come on, 2 kids. And I mean, I'm a mom, knowing now I'm a single mom, like how impossible it is to look perfect all the time. But he made me feel like I was doing something so wrong. Like, where's your lipstick? Go put some makeup on. You look awful. And I'd be like, okay.
Was there a moment or like a last straw? That's it. That like what happened that finally had you decide to leave and get out of this?
I think there was 3 pivotal moments for me, and it all happened in the same year. I think it was a lot of build up to these moments throughout the years where I just kept thinking like, how am I going to live like this the rest of my life? And I had my children, like what's going to happen with them? But I had 3 pivotal moments and they all happened really back to back. The first one was an anonymous call to CPS where someone had called CPS and said that these people are in danger. This woman and her kids are being abused. And I got a knock on the door when my kids were in school, and CPS was like, we're here to check on you. We got a call and we want to make sure you're okay. And at that moment, it was almost like, wow, someone's seeing it. Like I almost felt relieved, you know? It's like someone is seeing what I'm going through. And but at the same time, I was so afraid because CPS, I didn't know the process. Like, will they take my kids knowing that like we're being abused and I'm not doing anything about it? Like what's going to happen? But that really woke me up.
First of all, how many kids did you have?
I have 2 boys. 2 boys.
2 boys. And how old were they at this time?
Probably 6 and 8, turning 7 and 9. Very young. It's about 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah. So now, if CPS was called, do you know what incident could have happened that someone else would have seen this or known that this was happening to you? And was it also happening to your boys?
So my boys were both abused emotionally and physically. My younger one especially. He used to be hit by the belt, and I would hover over him and take it. So it was my older one, not as much, but there was moments of it. And then my younger one, I think, suffered the most. And I think I look back and I'm like, who could it have been? It could have been a neighbor. I mean, he used to yell a lot.
I see.
I remember an incident with a barbecue where he went ballistic on us. And it was very close to that time. So it could have been that. It could have been a friend. Like someone could have just seen something. But he was getting, like I said, it's progressively getting worse to the point people were kind of noticing it now and kind of being like, how is this? What's going on? Like, why is he like this kind of thing? And then a few months later, I went to a tournament for my son and he didn't want to come and it was on Father's Day weekend. And he said, you just go with the kids. And I said, it's Father's Day weekend. Like, don't you? Well, no, I have to work. You go with the kids. I remember my son was the only one standing there without a dad. And he came up to me and was like, Mom, like, I'm the only one here without my dad. Like, where do I go? And I looked at him. And then in that moment, I knew now it's affecting my children. Like the behavior is affecting my son. Like he's feeling it. And it broke my heart. And then the third was I was strangled. And that was when that was my, I'm out. So, and that was just about a month after not coming for, Father's Day weekend. And it was on July 3rd, the evening of July 3rd, which if I look back, it might have been a Friday night, right. I don't remember, but it probably was. And, he had gotten mad at me earlier in the day because I dented the leather in the car with something he had asked me to go buy. So when he took it out, there was just like an indentation in the car. So he took a towel and he whacked me across the face and said that I don't appreciate what he does for me. And how dare I disrespect the car? How dare I put a dent in the car? But here he is slapping me across the face. And I had a huge red mark. So I, looked at him, but I was woken at this point because those two other incidents have happened. So I walk into the house and he's screaming at me and he's cussing me in front of the kids. Your mom is a effing B. Your mom is stupid. She's this. And like my kids are just sitting there like looking at me like, what is going on? I have this huge red thing on my face and he's just carrying the towel. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And my kids, there's a look in their face, I could just see it. And that's when I knew I had to do it. It wasn't just for me anymore. It was like, I have to get out of here for these kids. Whereas later that evening, and then he strangled me in the middle of the night. So.
Okay.
That was it.
Yeah.
The boys were my strength. I didn't want the cycle to repeat. I didn't want them to become like that. I didn't want them to treat women or anybody like that. I didn't want them to become abusers. And I just said, if I don't get them out now, then I don't know, it might be too late. So they were my biggest strength. And I think that's what carried me through to get out.
And how do they feel about their mom now? Now seeing you leave, seeing you stand up for yourself?
Honestly, I think it's all through action. They're just watching me. And, I don't think I need to say much. I think they just have watched first they were in the household, so they knew what was happening. They've seen it. They were old enough to understand it. They saw. And now I'm in a healthy home, healthy environment. They can see the difference. They can recognize what's healthy, what's not healthy. And I think they're proud. Like I remember my son just a week ago was laid in bed with me. He was like, Mom, what are you doing? Tell me about your day. Like, what did you do? Can I see this? Can I see that? Can you show me this? And I have a jewelry line I started. They're showing their friends. Like, look at what my mom's company, look what she's doing. And I feel like I saved them. So no, like the way they watch me, the way I see their mannerisms, the way they speak about me. And it's very unspoken, but it's all through action. And I think I did what I wanted to do, which was break the cycle. And they see that and they see their mom healthy. They're healthy. We're in a loving home. There's no abuse. I think about a week ago, my son came into bed and I just did my first podcast. And he was so excited because I'd been telling the boys, like, today's my first podcast, you guys, I'm so excited. And so the end of the night, he crawled into bed and it was late. It was about 11. He's like, Mommy, can you show me whose podcast? Can you tell me what you did? What'd you talk about? And he was so intrigued and so proud. And his eyes lit up. And I think he can see the hard work, and all the things that I've been talking about and working on, and he's watching it happen. And it's just this big eyes, like looking at the screen and the questions, the curiosity. And it was such a moment. And I just looked at him and I didn't even know what to say. I was speechless, and I was like, well, and I shared it all, and he just is looking at me, and like, it's a very proud moment.
That's beautiful. Is it done now? Is he gone? Are you free? Because I think you're not.
Well, I'm not. Thankfully, I was awarded since the beginning. I've had a no contact restraining order for the boys and I.
Great.
Officially have it permanently since 2022. And then I also got one through the county of Santa Clara because he had some charges through the DA's office.
Wow.
However, the post-separation abuse is something that still is going on. And that's what's been the most difficult. And I think that is where not only was it the fear of leaving, but I think it's the after, what happens when I leave, that I was most fearful of. And it's everything that's been happening now. So there's just been a lot of harassment, a lot of social media, a lot of, reaching out to friends, family. I mean, I moved 2 years ago, but still hasn't stopped. The abuse is on social media probably every day, just speaking about me verbally and just defaming me and just saying horrible things, posting my picture. And the problem with this is it's been very difficult to stop. And that is where I struggle with, because I have a restraining order. There's been abuse and, everything's been documented, but social media has been the platform he's been using now. And there's not much I can do to stop it. So that is where I struggle, and that is what I want to change. That is what I hope to be able to figure out a way where abusers can't keep harassing and abusing their victims after,
Right.
getting out. In my case, it's through social media, and also through the courts, just taking me to court, with ex-parties, probably every other month with something that he wants to take me to court with. So it's been very, very difficult. But I hope that these things I've experienced can at least help me or guide me to change something for women in the future. And that is my goal.
Yeah. Are you working on any legislation, or are there legislative changes you'd like to see? We work with a lot of different organizations, and I'm happy to help in any way, because it doesn't seem like the courts are doing much.
They're not. And it's a very gray area with this because it's social media, And I hope I'm starting to work with organizations that support victims of domestic violence through my jewelry company, which I started earlier this year. Yeah, it's Glory Jewelry. So it's a brand I started, and this is actually one of my pieces, which is a butterfly, which symbolizes, so much for all of us, especially those of us who have left a very dark place. For me, it's all about transformation and new life. And I'm building the platform to build a support for women, talk, a lot about women empowerment, bringing women together, speaking about my story so I can share my experiences so women don't feel alone. And then knowing that, there is at the end of the tunnel, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And just to be an example of that. And then I hope that, I've kind of linked with a few organizations to help. Some of my proceeds will go to the organizations to help, causes that align with my brand. And then I really hope that I can get in front of legislation soon or in some way, because I don't know how, but this shouldn't, I don't know how I can manage this, but my goal is to find a way where you can't be abused on not only social media, but there has to be some sort of stop to the harassment in the court system. There should be no way that after 6 years that I'm still fighting and I'm getting ex-parties, and I have to spend all this money and fight for my rights to not be harassed. And that needs to stop, because if you ask most victims, I don't want to say all because I don't know, but if you ask victims and survivors, why didn't you leave, or why did it take you so long? And most of them, and I am one, will say, because staying was easier. Leaving was hard, and we didn't know. I don't have financial resources. I don't have support, the unknown, the abuse that happens afterwards, the fear. So staying was easier. And how scary is that you staying with your abuser is a better option than leaving. And that's what
Right.
resonates with me. It shouldn't be that way. Women should have their power, and they should not be afraid to leave, and they should be able to say, I'm done, and be protected in some way so that they can get out of it, safely.
100%. 100%. I always say you kind of like, you have to fight for the life that you want. And I think people don't realize how hard you do have to fight back when you've been pushed down so low. So you are a fighter, you are a survivor, and
you.
just your boys are lucky to have you.
Thank you. Well, I hope that I can make a difference with what I've been through. It's my main goal is just to make a change in the world so other women don't have to go through what I went through, and there has to be a change made in that. And if it's me or somebody else, I'm going to do whatever I can to make it happen, because it's not, I was able to survive. People are, but most cannot, and it's not, or will not, and don't want to, and they're stuck. So my efforts are really to make a change in this, because it's not acceptable.
No, it's not acceptable. That's beautiful. It's not acceptable at all. But let me ask you this. How can women, girls that might be going through something similar get in touch with you, reach out to you, support you in any way? Can you share that with us?
Of course. So I have 2 social media handles. I have my jewelry line, which is Glory Jewelry Store. And then my personal, which is Nillie Danesh, which is my name. And then the website for the jewelry store is gloryjewelry.com. There's all kinds of links to my social media, email, contact, if anyone wants to get in touch, and however I can help support or at least guide you in the right direction with my experience.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Marisol Nichols podcast. And please do not forget to click like and subscribe. And a big shout out to WD Hahn for our theme song, Something's Gotta Change. See you next time.